Have you ever wanted to read a book that was like your favorite film director's work? Well, I discuss on this channel a lot of books that have rather Lynchian themes or plot devices. And so today I am going to be giving you a list of books that I feel echo the work of the late David Lynch. So, what does Lynchian actually mean? Well, David Lynch's works are a mixture of surrealism, psychological horror, and a dreamlike state, usually where reality begins to blur in the protagonist's mind. Wikipedia also mentions experimental narratives and juxtapositions of the mundane and the grotesque. So, let's get into this. And yes, I did try to style myself like some characters in his films. Rita in Mulholland Drive. Would I ever pair this eyeshadow with this lipstick? Probably not, but we're gonna go with it. First on my list is a book I read many years ago, and that is a classic by the author Nathanael West. This is 2 novellas in one. It is Miss Lonely Hearts and The Day of the Locust. I'm specifically referring to The Day of the Locust. This is about 1930s Hollywood and follows a small scene designer who moves to Hollywood and finds that things are not quite what they seem, and there's a sort of frenzied, rabid drive that seems to motivate people. And there is a dark side of humanity that exists within this little town. This is a very hallucinatory novella, and as Lynch was greatly inspired by Hollywood and aspiring actresses in at least 2 of his films, I would recommend checking this book out. The next work is by an author who has made a living in at least 3 of her books, expounding on the same kind of themes and plot devices over and over again. And that is the author Mona Awad. When people think of fever dream in contemporary fiction, particularly contemporary weird girl lit, people often point to Mona Awad. But the book I'm going to recommend, I think, out of the 3 where she has used the fever dream state, is All's Well. This came out in 2021, and it follows another aspiring actress, but she is a drama teacher teaching high schoolers, and she suffers from chronic pain she had after a fall. And then one night she goes to this sort of mysterious bar and meets 3 different men there, and one of them gives her a famous potion, and suddenly she feels so much better. All of her chronic pain is gone, and she keeps wanting to return to this bar. Now, when I read this book, I was definitely picturing One-Eyed Jacks from Twin Peaks. It was giving that vibe, particularly I believe the color red and red curtains were mentioned a few times. And again, this woman kind of descends into madness, and her reality begins to blur into this dreamlike state where you're not quite sure what is actually happening. So I definitely recommend checking this one out, particularly because I feel like of all of Mona Awad's works, this one gets the least amount of attention, but I think it is actually one of her better crafted. The next book is sort of part Lynchian, part retelling of Celtic folklore, and that is Knock Knock Open Wide by Neil Sharpson. This book is perfect for Halloween. This begins with a young woman in the 1970s who is driving back from a party in rural Ireland, and she just got engaged and she's very happy, and all of a sudden she notices weird things start to happen to her on her drive. Her engagement finger suddenly feels tight. There's only static playing on the radio. And then suddenly in the middle of the road, she finds a man who is being eaten by dogs, but he is a corpse. And so she takes this corpse back to an abandoned farmhouse along the way, and she ends up spending the night there. And the things that happen to her in this farmhouse, she will never repeat again. Not to anyone, and not to her daughter, who we follow in this story 20 years later. And her daughter tries to uncover what happened to her mother that night. She knows it involves a mysterious silver ring, and it also weirdly involves a child's TV show. Because when the woman went to the farmhouse that night, the farmer was playing a child's TV show in the background. This book was so twisty and eerie, and I could not help thinking so much, though, of David Lynch when I read this. I mean, specifically, even there is a sapphic love interest in this, and one of the characters is named Betty. Come on. This is confusing in a way I think that some of Lynch's works are, but it was very unsettling. When I was specifically reading the beginning, the hair on my arms was standing up. So this is a really great psychological horror, and it is very much in that very twisty, what the F, Lynchian vein. The next book is a Swedish translation, and that is Carnality by Lina Wolff. This follows a young woman who travels to Madrid on a sabbatical, I believe, and it all begins one night when she starts talking to a random man in a bar. Because a lot of books in this list are usually some weird stuff happens at bars. And this man begins to tell her this very long story of how he became down on his luck and how he was obsessed with this live streamed internet TV show, and how he has been now after all of this time. And he went on this TV show. It was a whole ordeal. It was secretive, and now he's on the run from these TV show people. And she ends up becoming drawn into his world. And I can't really give away much, but there are some sinister characters, and you would almost think a rather supernatural element, but it's not so much supernatural, but it kind of appears that way because there's this weird mystique around the show that is run by a very sinister nun. So I definitely recommend checking this one out. The next book is one that plays with narrative and time, and that is Audition by Kitamura. This is a book that is composed of two halves, and the first half is a somewhat well-known and respected theater actress who is in her mid to late 40s, and she and her husband never had children. However, one day, she's approached by a young man in a restaurant who is in his early 20s, and he claims that he is her long-lost son. When she tells him that is impossible because she never gave birth, he says, well, I read a magazine article where you mentioned giving a child away. And now all of this is a misunderstanding that was due to an error with the interviewer and with print. However, she is deeply unsettled by this. And then we see a twist in time where what would have happened if he actually was her son. In the second half of the story, he is her son. And after having moved out, he comes back to live with her and her husband in their New York City apartment. And things take an unexpected weird turn where you cannot really begin to grasp who is playing, who is play acting, and who is being serious. And is this reality or is this wish fulfillment? Is it a dream? It had almost a Mobius strip quality too, which is I think is something that Lynch has done in several of his works. The next book is a collection of short stories, and that is White Cat, Black Dog by Kelly Link. Now, a lot of these short stories are modern retellings of fairy tales, rather obscure fairy tales. However, they are just weird and border on psychological horror. And there's specifically one story in this at the very end of the collection that was very Lynch-esque, Lynchian, and that was Skindler's Vale, where a young man agrees to take over a remote house-sitting gig for a friend, but there are certain conditions as to where he can enter the house and where guests can enter the house. And this is again another story that has a narrative. It plays with time. Time is a Mobius strip. I don't want to give away too much, but it was very eerie and unsettling. And then the last book I read that I wanted to add, which was my latest read, was The Sofa by Sam Munson. This is almost novella length, and it is about a man that comes back home one day after vacation with his family, and their sofa has been replaced with a new sofa, this rather musty looking antique, and they have no idea how it got there because there has been no sign of a break-in. And this sofa is haunted. Or is it? Or is the main character slowly going mad? Because weird stuff starts to happen. The faucet starts turning on, the toilet keeps running, random stuff starts happening to people and things around them, and he slowly becomes insane, trying to track down the owner of this previous couch, because there is a name tag listed in this couch. This was super eerie. Again, I'm not someone that generally gets freaked out when I read books. It's more movies that freak me out. It's usually the jump cuts that I just can't do. Even when I know it's coming, I can't do it. This was really great, absurdist, surrealist, psychological horror, and it was really well done. In some ways it was slightly grotesque in parts, but yeah, that was a recent read. And yes, that's it. Those are the 7 books I have that I believe are rather Lynchian. And if you like his films or the TV show he did, Twin Peaks, I'd recommend checking these out. I have a couple other books that are on my TBR list that I want to add. Let me know if you would like to see another video like this or see a reading vlog for those 3 books. I have one with me actually right now, Out There by Kate Folk. Kate Folk wrote Sky Daddy, but this is her debut novel, short story collection, and I feel like it might be kind of like Kelly Link, or maybe like kind of Black Mirror-esque. We'll see. I also have on my TBR the Renovation by Kenyan Orhan, which is about a bathroom renovation that leads to a portal that is like a Turkish prison cell. And Portalmania by Urbanski, which is another short story collection where are these random portals that can transport people. I don't know if these really fit the bill, but I wanted to throw them out there. And yeah, let me know if you have any books that you would recommend that keep with the spirit of David Lynch and his works, or have you read any of these books, or if you want to, and what you thought of them if you did read them. And yeah, that's it. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.